And just want to thank our attendees and our presenters today for being here. And my name is Anya Collette. I'm a planning analyst for the city of Bangor. And this lecture series is part of our comprehensive plan process. Today's subject is green infrastructure. And we have Trevor Smith and Colleen Murphy-Dunning. I'm just going to read their bios and then we'll go ahead from there. So Trevor Smith is the Design and Education Manager for Weston Nurseries. He specializes in green stormwater infrastructure, such as permeable pavers and rain gardens, as well as in landscapes designed to maximize Earth's systems while balancing them with the needs and desires of our human inhabitants. Mr. Smith is equally driven by both the form and function of his landscape designs. He is passionate about the natural world, which inspires his commitment to ecological principles and practices, and is devoted to creating beautiful landscapes that provide clients with an oasis to reconnect with the natural world. Mr. Smith holds several landscape certifications, including MCH, NOFA, AOLCP, LEED, GA, and he's also a past president of the Ecological Landscape Alliance and a current trustee. Colleen Murphy-Dunning is director of both the Hickson Center for Urban Ecology and the Urban Resources Initiative at the Yale School of Environment. URI carries out community-driven urban forestry to improve both the social and physical environment of the city of New Haven. Colleen administers the Hickson Center Fellowship Program to support graduate students conducting a wide range of research projects in cities across the globe. She also co-leads a field-based urban ecology module for all incoming YSE graduate students. Colleen received her BS in Public and Environmental Affairs from Indiana University and MS in Forestry from Humboldt State University. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Trevor.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to be presenting tonight. I am not going to waste any time in diving into what we will be talking about and how we're going to get this going. So green infrastructure, creating resilient cities naturally. That is what it's all about. Green infrastructure has been my focus for at least the past decade. I would have to say I went really into it and took my landscape design business more in the way of regenerative and resilient landscapes and further away from just ornamental land care. So I have been doing this for quite some time. And along the way, I've made a ton of mistakes. So I can tell you exactly how it needs to be done. And I've worked with this on a number of different levels. So green infrastructure, when we're talking green infrastructure, otherwise known as nature-based solutions, what is it all about? Green infrastructure is an approach to stormwater management that protects, restores, and mimics the natural water cycle. That's it. That's real easy. So like if that, you just keep that definition in your head, if you approach design and your projects with that simple definition in your head, you're already leaps and bounds away from many urban planners and many designers in the field when they tackle these things. So how does green infrastructure work? Well, again, it is mimicking the natural hydrologic system. So when you think about that, what is that all about? Well, in nature, when it rains, what happens? So we're talking about infiltration, we're talking about filtration, water storage, evaporation, and transpiration. So those are the goals. And again, just mimicking the natural hydrologic cycle. This is what happens. This is what we're trying to focus on. So again, like when you're going into these designs and when you're thinking about green infrastructure, you're really just thinking about nature. And what it is it's a system, it's a working system. And that's what we're going to get into just a little bit here. So the 5 core methods that I teach in most of my design classes for green infrastructure are rain harvesting systems, permeable pavements, bioretention and rain gardens. What you're looking at here is an urban bioretention system, green roofs, and tree plantings. So these are the 5 core systems that I focus on. This is not enough time to get all into this, but these are the areas that we can be thinking about. So how does green infrastructure work and why is it really good for us? And how does it kind of help our environment and help save the planet, we'll say. 95% of the Earth's heating and cooling is controlled by the hydrologic cycle. So there's a huge focus and everything on carbon capture. There's a huge focus on fossil fuel elimination and everything else. Though that is all very good, that is all part of climate change, that is all things that we need to do. However, this is a very important piece to remember, because if we can focus on this, we can actually have on through our green spaces have quite an impact on climate change in general. 25% of solar radiation is transferred back through transpiration. This is a huge, proponent or a huge check for green spaces, because the more green spaces we have, the more trees we have, the more transpiration we have. That is going to help cool our area. It's going to create microclimates. And then on a larger scale, as those microclimates connect, we can actually have, like I said, on more of a larger scale, we can kind of affect climate change and global warming. 1/3 of solar radiation is reflected back through clouds. This goes back to evapotranspiration. When we have paved surfaces, when we have bare soil, farmland, and construction sites, all of these are collecting heat and radiating heat back into the atmosphere. We know about the heat island effect. This happens in our cities. It also happens in our farmland. So this is something that if we have more green space, and if we look to nature-based solutions, we have that evapotranspiration, which will aid in cloud formation, which again reflects that solar radiation, increasing or mitigating the heat island effect. So let's look at the need for green infrastructure. So this is where I am from, Arlington, Massachusetts, and it is a very hilly town. And when it rains here, that water comes down, rain falls at 20 miles an hour. When you have a head like mine, you know that rain falls at 20 miles an hour. And when it gets together with all of its friends and picks up velocity, it does a whole lot of damage. While it is also getting together and picking up a whole lot of velocity, it gathers pollutants along the way, whether that be off the roads, whether that be off our roofs, or whether that be off our lawns. So we have all of this now toxic water, because that is water's job. Water is here to dissolve things. In the soil, it helps make nutrients soluble for our plants. Well, when it runs across our built surfaces, it picks up things like hydrocarbons. It picks up things like microplastics. They're now talking about acceptable levels of microplastics. That to me is like saying there's an acceptable level of rodent feces in my food. No, there isn't. There's no acceptable level of rodent feces, and I don't think that there's an acceptable level of microplastics in my body. So this is where green infrastructure comes in. Now, oftentimes when we're talking about green infrastructure, we're looking at it as this system. And I get a lot of pushback from municipalities because they're like, well, what are we going to do with our existing stormwater systems and everything? That's very short-sighted thinking. We need to marry green and gray. So if you have, say, on the left, this bioretention cell, and that bioretention cell was connected to this outfall, which goes into, say, a river or a body of water. Well, this bioretention cell is going to filter out those hydrocarbons. It is going to filter out those microplastics. So when that water actually does enter our waterways through any of the outfalls, it is going to be pre-filtered. It is going to be cleaner. And this will also slow down the time that it takes for that rainwater to hit a surface and actually make it to the river, which will reduce flooding, because all of our rivers are perfectly sized to handle the water in our watershed. What happens is it's supposed to, in a healthy watershed, it's going to take weeks, months, days for the water to make it to the lowest point. In our built environment, the water is getting into our rivers in minutes and hours. So our rivers aren't designed, Mother Nature did not design our rivers to handle all that water all at once. So this is a way to slow the timing of the water to enter the rivers. It's a way to clean the water before it enters our waterways. So we have this pre-filter, which will also help us clean our waterways. So we don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We don't need to throw away all of our gray infrastructure. We just need to be able to think creatively on how to marry the green and gray. These are some of the points that I get the biggest pushback on when dealing with municipalities about the introduction of green infrastructure. So lack of understanding, people not sure how it works, lack of personnel, mistrust of the ability of nature. That's one of the biggest ones. People don't understand how this planted up area is going to be able to filter out all the runoff or perform like I'm saying it's going to. Bad experiences with mismanaged GI. This is a big one, and this happens everywhere, because what has happened is there's one thing to plan on green infrastructure. It's another thing to truly plan green infrastructure. And to truly plan green infrastructure, you have to have a maintenance program built in from the beginning. So oftentimes, at your town hall or at the library on Earth Day, somebody's like, hey, let's put in a rain garden. And then the rain garden goes in, and isn't that great? And then nobody takes care of it. And then it collects trash, it collects invasives, and everybody's like, well, rain gardens don't work. Or a town puts in a bioretention system. And that bioretention system falls to the wayside because it isn't maintained, and then it actually becomes a liability. It doesn't work like it's supposed to, and it just becomes a problem with either a collection area for invasives or trash or whatever it might be. So oftentimes I get that pushback saying they don't work, and I was like, oh, what was the maintenance program? For the permeable pavers, what was your maintenance program? Nothing. We just put them down and that was it. I'm like, well, if you didn't keep the joints clean, they're not going to remain permeable. So you have to build in maintenance from the beginning, just like you do any system. This is green infrastructure is a water filtration solution system. So you have to look at it like a system. If it was an air handling system, we'd have to clean the filters. Just like our cars, we have to change the tires, the brakes, the filters, and everything else. Anytime you have a functioning system, to keep it functioning, you have to maintain it. And maintenance is something that as a municipality, we do all the time. We maintain our roads, we maintain our bridges, we maintain our street trees. So it's not like maintenance is out of the question, which is the final excuse that I get all the time. Oh, they're very high maintenance, which in reality, it's not necessarily true. It's just different maintenance. That's all. And funding is a problem. Funding needs to be made available. One of the things I got into, I taught a green infrastructure class to Massachusetts DPWs. And they were saying everybody wants us to put in all these permeable pavers, but to maintain all these permeable pavers, we need to get a sweeper, and that sweeper is going to be $4 million. So now what do? Like, they're going to fund the pavers, but they don't want to fund the sweeper. So again, we have to look at the whole system and what it's going to take to make it function. So within the landscape and construction industry, there is a huge need for trained professionals, because as I mentioned, municipalities are saying they want green infrastructure. Architects, landscape architects, and urban planners are planning for green infrastructure. But what's happening is these jobs now are going to landscape or construction companies that have no understanding of green infrastructure. And this is a huge thing, because many of them are following the installation instructions without a true understanding on how it works. And this is where much of my business was built. The example that I give all of the time was that I got called to this brand new condominium area system, and they had a bioretention swale put in, and it wasn't functioning. And the owners called me and said, what is wrong with this? Why isn't it functioning? Well, the bioswale was built uphill from the water that it was supposed to be collecting off of the parking lot. Now, water might flow uphill on paper, but in reality, water doesn't flow uphill. Now, let me just tell you, all the plantings were right. They were beautiful. They were in the perfect spot. The bioswale, the constructed soil, the biosoils that were in there were absolutely perfect, perfectly mixed, perfectly applied. Everything about this was great. If the construction company knew what it was supposed to do, they would have probably caught the fact that it was upgrade from the water that it was supposed to collect. And also I also get when I'm dealing with construction companies, they're not understanding why everybody's making such a big deal, out of nature-based solutions and green infrastructures, and why they're being standardized. So this all comes down to education. We need to educate our communities. We need to educate ourselves, our municipalities, our construction companies, and whoever's putting this stuff in. Everybody needs to know the what's and the whys of green infrastructure and the importance of it and what it takes to maintain it. And that way we will have successful nature-based solutions. So this is just a quick principle that I teach in my design class that very, very much applies to this. It's the okay and principle. So what it is all about is trying to get the maximum impact out of any project that you have. So you ask yourself, have we addressed every environmental opportunity here? What do I mean by that? let's just say that we are creating a rain garden. So we're creating a rain garden. All right. And so that rain garden is going to take all the water off of this single family home. Okay. And we're going to use all native plants in that rain garden, which makes it better. Okay. And we're going to use bird and pollinator specific plants. Okay. And we're going to use native plants that are actually, specific for specialized bees within our list of native plants. Okay, so see, it keeps getting better and better and better. And now just through your planting selection, you've gathered a whole lot. Okay, and what else? And we are going to use a youth group to help us plant the whole thing so that they can understand about rainwater capture and what that's all about. So you just keep asking yourself, okay, and how can I make this better until you run out of, until it doesn't become practical anymore, or until you run out of, ands. So can this project be used for training a future workforce? Is there an opportunity to write into the RFP a requirement for entry-level workers? Because what you'll learn from many people is that this is the perfect opportunity for entry-level workers. Will these projects create a need to hire additional personnel? There's nothing wrong with, as long as we adjust our budgets, that hiring more people is great. Creating new divisions is great. Asking our people who are already overworked to do more is not great. Will these projects create a demand for new career and job opportunities in the future? My dream is to have as many GI specific maintenance companies as we have lawn care maintenance companies. People who will go up on roofs and go into bioswales and keep those things working. Is there an opportunity to educate the community about GI? So if we put in a bioswale or something in a public place, let's have signage and let's have an eco tour, which it would be like, let's invite the community to kind of tour it and say, this is what this is about. So they understand it and they will appreciate it more. So as I talked about, skills and job opportunities are huge here, because one of the biggest complaints is we don't have the workforce. We don't have the personnel for maintenance. How are we going to do this? So I'm just going to run through two real quick case studies of ways, these were grant funded opportunities that we tried to prove that you can install GI while training the necessary workforce. And the other piece here was to install GI and prove that it doesn't have to cost tens of thousands of dollars to have an impact. So the green roof on bus shelters, this was EPA funded. We put 15 green roofs on bus shelters around the city. The objectives were to prove low cost of GI. So this happened in 2016. And at that time, each roof went on for about $5,000. So not a lot. And if we had done every roof in the Boston area, we would have landed in just under an acre. So in a 1-inch rain event on 1 acre of land, that's 27,000 gallons of water. So we would have offset or slowed and filtered 27,000 gallons of water that would have then made its way into the harbor. We wanted to prove that entry-level job training opportunities here. We wanted to highlight the opportunity for underserved communities. We want to bring green infrastructure to street level, because many people, especially in underserved communities, but many people don't see green roofs unless you work in a building, that has a green roof, go to a hotel that looks over green roofs or has green roofs, go to a university that has green roofs. If you're just the average person, you don't see that. So we were trying to bring the conversation to street level. We worked with Youth Build Boston here. And as I said, we put together 15 green roofs on the tops of bus shelters. You'll see we had signage. We had lots of signage in each bus shelter explaining what was going on, that through this, we were creating jobs, we were creating habitat, we were cleaning stormwater. So we had all of that going on. These roofs, we also proved through our choices. We chose to order our materials from minority and women-owned, which sometimes is the same thing, businesses. So the edging and the sedum mats that we used and the soil that we used were all from minority and women-owned businesses, just because we are voting with our dollars, and in the okay and principle, we were trying to show how much of an impact we can have with just a tiny project. So this right here is just, real simple. We did through Youth Build Boston, they maintain the shelters for the entire season. and we ran a number of metrics. So here we have the runoff during a huge rain event of a bus, just a standard bus shelter, and the green roof bus shelter, and just how much cleaner the water running off the shelter was. This is what I'm saying. We've pre-filtered that water, and that water is going to make its way to the storm drain, which goes into the harbor, which now we're cleaning the harbor simultaneously. Like I said, they maintained and kept metrics. I will draw your attention to the bottom left. You will see the green roof itself is 81 degrees when the sidewalk is 127 degrees. This was great just to show the students this whole piece, but it was, again, also great just to show the city of Boston just how these little tiny 60 square foot shelters will make a huge difference. And when you add them all up, make a difference to the entire community and the entire area, reducing that heat island effect, increasing that evapotranspiration and not reflecting that heat back into the atmosphere in the evening, while creating green corridors through the city. Another example, again, we worked with Youth Build Boston on the Boston project, and we worked with the Boston Parks Department, and we rehabbed, maintained 5 different rain gardens and bioswales throughout the city. The objectives here: prove the low cost, that it doesn't really cost tens of thousands of dollars to build and maintain rain gardens and bioswales. It doesn't have to be. Entry-level job training, because we were using people who had barely knew how to use hand tools, and by the end of the season, they could tell you, and they could fill out whole check sheets on the inlets and the outflows, and they had basic plant ID, weed ID, and green infrastructure maintenance knowledge. So that's what this was all about, just saying, hey, you tell us that you don't have enough staff for this. Here are some people who are dying to have a job, and through this program, they now have the basics to understand how to do this. Again, highlight the opportunities, underserved communities, bring GI to street level, and beautify neighborhoods. So here, like I said, this was a rain garden in East Boston. This channel is designed to actually save the rest of East Boston from going under. It's a channel that cuts through East Boston to take the storm rise and the sea level rise as it comes on land. And through here, it's a walking path and a corridor. And we just had to kind of take apart and put together this rain garden. Again, we learned plant ID, weed ID, put the whole thing together. You can see the amount of weed seeds that blow in because you can't see the rocks anymore, but we weeded and removed the trash and everything else from here. And this rain garden just kind of blossomed and did its thing. And the youth that took care of this for the entire season were really impressed, especially when that eupatorium got taller than they were. They were like, wow, this is amazing. So we learned about native plants and the benefits of native plants, as well as stormwater management. Just another example in Boston. This is one of the other ones we took care of. This one was already constructed, and this was very much a maintenance program that we did. But we learned what plants are supposed to be there, what aren't, how to keep this open, how this functions, etc. And then, we came in at the end. So we learned the entire cycle of seasonal maintenance. You saw from spring, getting it ready, getting the trash out, getting everything cut back, to fall, to cutting things back, and to making sure that the excess debris is out of there, and that the inlets and the outlets aren't going to be clogged over the course of the winter, and it will still be able to function. Finally, one of the biggest things that I advocate for are trees, because trees absorb 25% of atmospheric carbon. Trees stop that rainfall. They slow that rainfall, and they gently set the rain to the ground. So when they catch that 20-mile-an-hour drop and they gently set it to the ground where it can absorb into the ground, they steal the velocity, they steal the frequency of how quick the rain is hitting the ground. So they're gently setting those drops to the ground over a period of time, increasing infiltration, which is exactly what we need, because the more infiltration we have, the more transpiration we have, because we have all of that water in the soil. Trees cool our areas, so they're taking up carbon, they're creating habitat, They're increasing people's good vibes and feels through biophilia, making everybody feel good about themselves, creating green corridors through the city. So there really isn't any downfalls to trees, except for the fact that we try to put trees this size, or hope they get to be this size, in a little 4x4 square in the sidewalk. And that's not a thing. So oftentimes last year, the biggest, I sat down with a town and they were like, we're going to plant 500 trees. And I said, you know what? How about you plant 250 properly? Take that money and make sure that they have enough soil space to make sure that they live beyond the 5 to 8 year cycle that they have. Because it's not until a tree matures does it start drawing down the carbon like we want it to. Does it start cooling the area like we want it to? If you want to see the effect of tree cooling on any area, look up what happened to the city of Worcester when they had to cut down all their trees due to the Asian longhorn beetle. Once they had to cut down all their trees, the electricity use and everything during the summer jacked way up because they didn't have that tree cover anymore. So this is the cheapest and easiest thing that we can do to help cool our cities and offset climate change. The NGICP program. This is a green infrastructure program that oftentimes during the winter, I do 2 or 3 training courses for this. It is a national certification put on by EnviroCert. When you go through the training program that I do, which is 35 hours, you are then eligible to take the test. If you take the test and pass the test, you are then a certified, or you have a certification in installing, maintaining, and inspecting green infrastructure. So we go through for 35 hours. We walk through all the different types of green infrastructure, how they're installed, and how to identify if they're working or not working and what to do about it. It is very kind of entry level. So if I am teaching this to entry level people, then that's really the route that we go. But I've also taught this to urban planners, engineers, and DPWs, in which case I throw in a couple more presentations, which kind of kick it up to another level. But this is something to look into. I am not the only instructor, but I will be holding courses this coming fall and winter if you're looking into it. So just real quick with the conclusion. It's common when introducing new ideas that involve change that there's going to be challenge and that there's going to be pushback to that. We can achieve both immediate installation of GI that we need so badly while building a workforce. Those 2 case studies just showed that. Systematic improvements begin with asking more from our designs and not just saying, hey, let's just put this water in the ground, or let's just send this water away. There's no such thing as away. We're a blue marble floating out in space. Away is actually somewhere else. So we're just moving the problem over and off our plate and onto somebody else's. Address as many environmental and social issues as we can with each design, because why not? This is an opportunity. It's a relatively new, we'll call it field, or new opportunity for our cities. So we can do so much more than just put it in. We can actually address many issues through the installation of green infrastructure. It is extremely important to write RFPs that require certified professionals, that require maybe entry-level workers, or require part of it being used, part of that green infrastructure being used as training. We need to write our RFPs to next level and start setting the stage for the next level of green infrastructure, the next 25 years or 10 years of it. And that's going to include all of these people. So we need to write our RFPs differently and not just be a means to an end. So this is me. I thank you very much. I think I went over and I do apologize, but that is how you can get in touch with me. If you would like to ask me any follow-up questions or the like, I would very much appreciate it. People do all the time, so please do. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much. And Colleen, take it away.
Thanks, Trevor. Hi, everybody. I'm going to just get my slides up too and share my screen. So give me 1 second. I appreciate going after you, Trevor, so that I can kind of build on what you've already presented, and I think be echoing some of your ideas, but hopefully not being redundant. So I'm going to talk more specifically about how we've been doing workforce development in New Haven, Connecticut on building biospheres, so specifically on that type of green infrastructure. And I want to start by kind of giving you, here's an outline of what I want to kind of go over, the environmental and social context of our city, why we're taking the approach we're taking, partners that we're working with, how we went from a pilot to scaling up to a big project, and some of the program outcomes. And so just even in this initial slide, you see this is a bioswale, and you can see the cutout in a rain event with the water coming into the bioswale. So a little background about where I'm going to tell you about our city here in Connecticut. It's a relatively small city, or average sized city in the US. It's 130,000 population. And you can see we have 3 rivers that run north to south in our city that empty into Long Island Sound. So a lot of the kind of pollution concerns that Trevor outlined are concerns for our city, as we don't want to be part of the problem of polluting Long Island Sound and the ocean. The biggest kind of thing that we're focused on with the bioswales is thinking about stormwater runoff that Trevor already described to some degree. But to think in this diagram, you can see, if you're not familiar, the difference between a separated sewer system or a combined sewer system. So on the right, you can see the stormwater in blue is coming off the roof of the house, or off the driveway, or off the road, and goes into its own pipe, whereas sewage from the house would go into its separate pipe. So this is a separated system on the right, whereas on the left, the sewage goes into the same pipe. And in a major rain event, you will have the stormwater will empty right out of those pipes, can go right into the river and then Long Island Sound, whereas the sewage goes to the treatment plant and is treated before it's released into Long Island Sound. And the combined system on the left, all the water will go, the sewage and the stormwater, to the wastewater treatment plant, except in a major rain event. And then in that case, we have what we call an overflow or an outfall, where you'll have both sewage and stormwater empty into the rivers and then Long Island Sound. So if we can reduce some of the water, some of the stormwater in either one of these scenarios, we reduce how much water will go into Long Island Sound that, as Trevor already described, gets polluted as it picks up, whether it's microplastics or oil or anything off the roadways, and carries that into our water bodies. So that's the pollution that we're trying to avoid by creating bioswales. This is another map of New Haven, and in this map, you can see all these dots represent the stormwater outfalls and the combined sewer outfalls. And so we're working with our city engineer to identify where we should be building bioswales to reduce those outfalls. And some of the slides I'm presenting are from my partner, one of the engineers at the city of New Haven, who has really led this development of this work in New Haven. And we are a partner carrying out the work under their lead. So my program that partners with the city is really, like Trevor, about the workforce development. How do we install them? Who installs them? And how can we bring more benefit, not just to the environment, but to underserved communities, or to society in general? So I want to focus first now a little bit about, well, what about the social side? What's our city like, and what are some challenges we face? So this map, now you're getting used to a picture of New Haven's map, which I don't know if you see what I see, which is a shape of a kangaroo. So here's the outline of New Haven. And you can see in this map, some of the darkest areas represent areas of neighborhoods of high poverty. So for example, in the dark blue at the bottom of the kangaroo and the pouch there, you can see that's the Hill neighborhood. It has 43% of people in that neighborhood live in poverty. Whereas other more wealthy communities like the Westville neighborhood, which is kind of the light color in the face of the kangaroo, has only 8% poverty. So we have neighborhoods that have, and this is common throughout our entire country, where we have segregated poor neighborhoods and wealthier neighborhoods. And so how do we address this problem where we have people living in poverty and who need employment. Relatedly, another problem that we have all across our country and in New Haven is a problem of incarceration. So in our average sized American city, we have 1,200 people return from prison every year in New Haven. And about half of the people end up within 5 years going back to prison. And that is in large part because once you have a felony arrest or conviction, it's very difficult to get a job. And so that repeats this path of poverty, this cycle of poverty, with kids growing up in poverty because maybe one of their parents are in prison, or, or this, as I have on the screen here, the other kind of related problems of homelessness and so forth. So how do we try to break that cycle as well? So we started a green infrastructure program in New Haven. Initially, we started focusing on tree planting, as Trevor described, as a really that's the simple lift of doing green infrastructure. The kind of the most basic element is to plant trees. And we started that program in 2007 with high school kids. And we would plant with them, as you can see in these images, teams of high school students working under the supervision of Yale forestry graduate students who wanted to share what they were learning with high school kids and plant trees on behalf of neighbors in New Haven. And then that program really grew. In 2010, we started also hiring people who were recently released from prison. And we partnered with another nonprofit whose entire focus is about providing the kind of wraparound supports that help people to retain their freedom and to not be rearrested. And part of that is employment, but there's also other services they need. So we partner with them, bring our expertise of urban forestry, and our partner at Emerge brings the other kinds of wraparound supports. So since 2010, we've also been, during the week, we work with adults who've been recently released from incarceration, and on the weekend, we plant with high school kids. And since we started this program, we have planted 10,000 trees with this Green Job program, and also created a lot of workforce development opportunities to people who really need them. Now, we then expanded that work. In 2013, we built our first bioswale, and this is a picture of it. And it was really, you can see this is during a rain event, and it's even bringing trash off the road right into the bioswale. And it was really to stop at an important intersection near a highway where there was some road flooding, that the city engineer asked us to construct one. And it was a pilot just to kind of try, will this work? Like a proof of concept. And it was successful. And so we decided we would write a grant to try to do more. So we wrote a grant to National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to build 8 in a specific neighborhood where there was a problem of a combined sewer outfall dumping water into the West River. You can see these are some images of our team doing the construction. It's all hand dug. It's all people who have never built them before and learning how to do, just like Trevor described. So these are some images of some of the, like, what this construction looks like. Here's one we built in front of a school where they first, basically you're digging by hand, a large chamber, and then before we backfill it, we could see there on the right measuring and then putting in a geotextile. And then here's a different project where same funder was a grant fund to kind of continue to explore and kind of learn the best methods for putting in this kind of construction. Here they're putting in what's known as a gabion, which is like a chamber in an overflow event where the water can pass really quickly through that caged system called a gabion. And here you can see we started building them next in the downtown, where the city engineered that this would be a place where we could really reduce a problem where the whole system gets overloaded and we have a big problem of stormwater overflows. So here we're building, you can see you have to put in some supports there before you're backfilling. They're 5 feet deep, they're 5 feet wide, and they're 15 feet long. And here's the backfilling with the gravel and the geotextile and putting in the gabion. And then ultimately, this is what they look like at the surface. They look like to neighbors or residents or businesses that they're an attractive amenity. As Trevor pointed out, they have to be maintained. But we've adapted over time the design. Like we've added as you can see on the slide here, some granite curbing and edging. We changed the fencing to be more durable. And we have monitored these to test their efficacy, and they take much more volume of water than the city even anticipated. Here's just another example. So I want to get a little bit to kind of some of the points that Trevor brought up about thinking about the whole picture, about the maintenance and about engaging residents. So this is an example of where we were kind of initially working on this and testing out designs. I think this was around the year 2015. We had high school kids working on the maintenance of them and also knocking on doors and talking to neighbors about the work. We held in the same neighborhood as we taught people about what those bioswales were doing. We also offered to do rain barrel workshops, and residents could get a free rain barrel for their homes, and the high school students helped with that program. As Trevor pointed out, you've got to use signage. It's a passive way to have easy education for people to learn about what these systems are doing. Here's a handout for the outreach when we scaled up to be going from a pilot of doing half a dozen with small grants to building nearly 200 of them in our downtown. We created outreach materials so that when businesses or residents, when one was going to be installed, that they would understand what was happening. So the city of New Haven has built about 200, I think it's closer to 300 now. And these you can see around the downtown, there are very many of them. And we've constructed about 70% of those through this workforce development. And besides impacting the stormwater runoff, it's also impacting the people who had this employment. So this is a slide from our partners at Emerge, that the people that we have trained and hired and paid to do this work had some of, as you can see here, 40% of them had spent half of their life in prison. 75% had never had a steady job. So, and 85% of them are parents. And so to create this as a way of breaking that cycle, not only created employment for them, but also address the kind of workforce development opportunity that Trevor outlined. So I'm going to stop there. And I think we still have a little bit of time for questions.
Thank you, Colleen. That was great.
That was awesome, Colleen.
Yeah. And thank you, Trevor, as well. If anybody has any questions, just raise your hand and I'll click on you to unmute. I did just have one question to start off. As far as the maintenance for green infrastructure, and probably either of you can answer this, what does that look like for especially bioswales and rain gardens? Like, how often do you have to maintain it and what's involved really?
I'll start with the bioswales. We developed a maintenance plan for the city of New Haven that would have ideally had at least 4 to 6 cleanouts per year per bioswale. We have not achieved that with the city, but that was our goal. And when we originally started doing this, we were very careful to kind of quantify what it took to maintain them well. So for example, we would measure the volume of leaf litter we took out. That's one of the big things in the fall. You don't want these to clog up with leaves. So you need to remove the leaf litter so that when you have a rain event, it still will percolate through the sandy soil and the aggregate stone that you've put in the bioswale. You also have to clean out a sediment trap that are in these. And you have to clean out litter. And in different times of the year, like in the summer, you have to weed them. They will need to be cut back. If you've got shrubs, they might need to get pruned back and so forth. So, because you don't ever want to affect, they're in the right of way. So you don't want someone pulling out of a driveway and not having clear sight lines, for example. So we have a very clear program of what should be done. We have engaged with the city on doing some of that maintenance, and they're still kind of figuring out, now that they scaled up this many, what it will take to finance and continuously ensure that they're cleaned out well. Sometimes you'll have to fix things like a broken fence, things like that. Someone might hit with a car, one of the fence posts. That's happened. But some of the work is actually very simple that a neighbor could do, or a high school student, anyone could do, like cleaning out the leaf litter and out the trash. And so when we do our outreach, we always encourage people to play an active role. This is right. You're a resident of the planet too. You have a role, the way you can volunteer and be active by just cleaning out a bioswale in front of your house. Just like you could also just water the street tree in front of your house. So we try to engage our public in playing an active role as their civic duty to the town and to the planet. But we know that it also will require some additional support to do some of the other work. And so we're trying to balance that. We're trying to figure it out. We are in a maintenance phase now. We have a small maintenance contract with the city right now, but we don't, I would say, the city is working on a long-term plan, and I'm not the city engineer. So I'm a partner and grateful to do it with them, and grateful to be able to find ways to bring and involve more parts of our community in this type of work.
Absolutely. I don't have too much to add to that. It's really on the piece that I would like to point out, though, is that these systems are designed to catch trash from the street. Like, the idea is to keep that out of a storm drain. And oftentimes people are like, all they do is collect the trash that's blowing down the street. That's part of the idea. That's part of the filtration of these systems.
It means they're working.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And very much I've found, like, the two biggest times are like the spring cleanup and the fall cleanup. And then in there, it is just checks. And so when I was doing it for that program, we were just checking once or twice a month. Certain, once certain bioswales or certain bioretention systems are going to receive more water or need more attention than others. So, you begin to understand that. Some might need a once a month, some might need to be checked after every single major rain event. But it's certainly not high maintenance. I mean, the weeding and everything is almost on par with, if you were going down and you were emptying the trash out of like the park trash cans or, anything of the like. I mean, it's really not that much more. It's, sometimes it's only 5-10 minutes just checking what's up, pick up a couple cigarette packs and a chip bag, and then you're done. So it's pretty easy. The idea is you just want to make sure that you catch a clog or whatever before it happens. But yeah, it's really, it's pretty easy to put into the flow.
Yeah. Okay. Brandon Kime's got an issue. Brandon, you can go ahead and talk.
Thank you. Thank you both very much for that presentation. I was just wondering, there's an environmental politics scholar named Christian Hunold at Drexel University, and he's written about green infrastructure issues in Philadelphia. And so he writes that green infrastructure is, something that was brought in by the city, really to provide environmental services. But of course, it's really great animal habitat too. But, the people installing that hadn't really been thinking so much about animals at the time. And so there are kind of potential tensions in there where, people don't often think of cities as places where wild animals belong, and the animals might not be welcome. And you can end up, with people feeling a sense of conflict, or animals being trapped and killed and relocated. And, things can get a little bit messier than maybe was expected at the outset. So I'm just wondering whether, that's something you've encountered, and kind of whether there are things that can be, baked into the process at the outset to make sure that, it's good for everybody, including the animals.
I'd be curious to understand what kind of animals that they're attracting in Philly. And I do know a little bit about that program. I've heard some presentations, but I'm not familiar with that paper. And I would say in New Haven, we have planted some pollinator type of plants, but it's not attracted like megafauna. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious about what kind of animals that, and what, like the idea of trapping, relocating, we've not encountered that.
Yeah, nor have we in Boston. I mean, it's really, I think some of it comes down to the design, certain by choosing certain plants, by the way you arrange your plants, and by the way you maintain, you will definitely eliminate, say, habitat for rats, which would be the only thing that I would say that would, could happen. But we never really saw any rat presence, like nesting there.
We haven't either.
And, certainly, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of like, would a fox, would rabbits bed down? I don't know, but it's also, again, it's how you don't want to make it too sparse, but you also don't want to let it get overgrown, and if it's maintained, it doesn't really end up being like a resting place. The most that, what I've really seen is birds and insects. Between just berries and seeds and also insect population, I've seen an increase in songbirds through the corridors that we were working in.
Mhm. Great, thank you.
Kind of going back to the maintenance question I had, I'm wondering about green roofs. I feel like those would be lower maintenance, and maybe weeding would be the main factor there, but any more insight on that? I'm a big proponent of green roofs, so.
So green, if you don't mind, green roofs, yes, very much weeding. Green roofs, you just need to, the majority of maintenance that is involved with a green roof is to make sure that it's functioning. Make sure that the roof is draining still properly. Make sure that, no trees or anything have kind of like taken seed there, because that's what you don't want. Little weeds here and there you can take care of, but you don't want to neglect it for so long that, something large takes root that can actually mess with the integrity of the rubber liners, etc. But, just like the swales, I mean, green roofs, in maintaining them on both large and small scales, it's really about, are the drains open? Are your inlets and outlets, are your drains open? Is there a problem? Like, is there puddling in an area? If so, why? Is there, with green roofs, depending on the height of the roof, you have to say, okay, do I have excessive, wind erosion that's happening up here? And is that because the plants haven't taken and there's bald spots? But it's more about vegetative cover on a green roof that I've found, and making sure that your drains are open and that the roof is actually functioning. As far as weeding's concerned, especially on an extensive roof, which is just all, sedums, it's pretty easy just to run through and pick up any, seeds that have blown in, that have taken sprout.
So I've seen certain green roofs, like Chicago City Hall, I think, installed like a rooftop prairie or something like that. I mean, what's your take on doing something like that versus doing sedum? Because a lot of the green roofs I see do use sedum, and I would be interested in seeing something that uses more native plants and things like that. So what are the things to consider there?
Weight.
Yeah.
Weight's the big one. So the green roofs on the bus shelters, we seeded with like a native meadow mix, just figuring that what came up would come up. Didn't expect them to ever reach like full maturity, but figured we'd have like some little dwarf plants happening and certain things would take hold within the sedum. The sedum is real easy just to lay out, but I love the idea of natives. But many of the natives, you need to have more than just, say, 4 inches of soil.
Right.
But once they get going, absolutely. The other piece you would have to make sure of is that with larger plants like that, you would need to remove the biomass from that area, because you do not want to add weight and you don't want to clog the soils, because they're going to need to drain, at a certain, a certain capacity.
And the other thing that's good about sedum is they don't take as much water.
Right.
They don't need as much water. So, you got to think it's not like your garden in the backyard where you're going to add water when it needs it. You're not going to be watering, you don't want to be adding the weight of water, so that
Right.
the plant, it's like as Trevor said, it's all about the weight.
Yeah. But I mean,
So
like, that's perfect for like let's say like the library or something, like where you're going to see it. But like a sedum is perfect for like the top of whatever, a bank where nobody's really going to see it, but it's great to have it there for the green corridor, for the birds to move through and the pollinators to move through. But if you're not going to see it, just go with the sedum, lightweight, etc. If it's a retrofit, go with the sedum because of the lightweight. New construction where people are going to appreciate that meadow up there, absolutely go and try it. It's just a lot more maintenance involved.
Yeah. So the sedums are pretty cold hardy.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, they're pretty much set them and forget them once they get going.
Okay. Does anybody else have any more questions? you know, something to spur some questions. As this is part of our comprehensive plan, one thing we want to get an idea of is if people think that we should talk about this in our comprehensive plan. We're going to have an entire section devoted to natural resources and open space. And, you know, do we want to talk about, you know, incentivizing green roofs and green infrastructure and things like that in our, especially our urban core? So if anybody has any thoughts on that, feel free to speak up.
Oh, no. Ow. Oh.
This is the way we've always done it is the most dangerous phrase in the English language. So yes, it will take some time to introduce and to learn to build and maintain green infrastructure. It's because it's different from how you've always planned it. It's different from how you've always done it. But we have the technologies, the studies are in. You don't need the discussions anymore. It's real easy to reach out to another city that has done it and have somebody walk you through it. So it's not like this big, scary, unproven thing anymore. So all it takes is intent. You need to say, our city is going to be this from now on. We are going to think like this from now on. When I had that conversation with the DPWs and people were just like talking about, taking on this maintenance and that maintenance, I said, you know what it really is like is if you always put on your right sock first, it's like putting on your left sock first. It's going to feel a little awkward in the beginning because you're not used to doing it. But you know what? Either way, you leave the house with both socks on your feet. So it's like, it's a new thing. It's a little weird and uncomfortable. It might be scary to put your left sock on rather than your right. But in reality, it's, you know, it's something. But we need to start designing our cities and we need to start building with intent and not just kind of mindless design and mindless building. We have to say, we're going to do this. It's the OK and principle. You know, we are going to do this. We are going to do this for our people, for our planet, you know, for the overall health of the city, for the waterways and all the waterways that those connect to. You know, it's just, one thing we've realized, especially during COVID, but one thing we can't deny now is how connected we all are and how connected everything is. You know, we can't, we're doing ourselves a disservice if we pretend that that's not a thing.
Yeah.
I'll just offer a kind of closing thought is, as Trevor said, cities are really willing to help each other. And I know that was our experience in New Haven. We borrowed designs from New York and tested them and made small modifications. But we also started with pilots. We went from 1 to 6 to 8 to dozens to several hundred, you know, so we scaled up over time. So kind of like learning your way first. And I know that it's a cost-effective, green infrastructure is cost-effective and it provides multiple benefits, unlike gray infrastructure, which is more costly and isn't mimicking nature as Trevor outlined. And so anyway, I encourage you guys to test it out.
Brandon, did you have something you wanted to say?
Oh, no, I already said it.
Oh, okay. All right, well, I guess we'll wrap that up. Thank you both, Colleen and Trevor. This has been a really great discussion. And yeah, this recording will be posted and it'll also be posted on our comp plan page as well as the city's Facebook page. So yeah.
Guys, thank you so much. Appreciate you having me. Colleen,
Yeah,
great.
Likewise, thank you. Nice to meet you all.
You too. Thanks.